Hi, kindergartners. Welcome back to Chapter 7 of The Wizard of Oz. We are well on our way now to start our journey. Let's just look at our board before we get started, just to remind us of all the different things that we have learned so far. I'll scoot you guys back just a little bit. This, of course, is our map. It's the same map that you have, right? And of course, we see in the middle, the Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz are labeled. They're in green because Emerald City is green, as you will learn. I do have the Good Witch of the North up here, and I would put the Wicked Witch of the East over on this side, but there's just no room. Our friends are traveling on the yellow brick road, so that's right here in yellow, which I know is hard to see on the camera. Down here, we have some important things going on here. This is all about Dorothy. So again, this says Dorothy and Toto, Kansas, Cyclone, Silver Shoes, and Ruby Red Slippers. And you know that the Silver Shoes are from the story and the Ruby Red Slippers are from the movie. Then we met the Scarecrow. And he's decided that he wants to ask Oz for a brain. Then we met the Tin Man, and he decided that he'd had brains and a heart, and he really wanted to ask for a heart. And then in the last chapter, we happened to meet the Cowardly Lion. And the Cowardly Lion is going to go and ask for courage because he wants to be brave. So we now have our 4 comrades, as they call themselves in the story, which also means friends. And this is what they look like in the book. And this is what they look like in the most amazing movie. And so now that we have our 4 main characters, this is where our story really begins. So the rest of the chapters, chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, were all sort of the beginning because they were introducing us to our main characters. And now that we have them, we're really going to get started on our journey to Oz. Now, you don't have a board like this at home, but you do have the same word wall on the back with some of the most important names. So you can learn to write all of those different things. Please notice when you're looking at your word wall that Dorothy and Toto, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Wicked Witch, their names all start with uppercase letters. And if you look really closely, you'll notice that so does the Emerald City, because the Emerald City is the name of the city. So we always put an uppercase at the beginnings of names. So you can see that on your word wall. And you can see that I did it right here on my own word wall that I made. Okay, so let's get started. Chapter 7 is called The Journey to the Great Oz. They were obliged to camp out that night under a large tree in the forest, for there were no houses near. The tree was made of good, thick covering to protect them from the dew. And the Tin Woodman chopped a great pile of wood with his axe, and Dorothy built a splendid fire that warmed her and made her feel less lonely. She and Toto ate the last of their bread, and now she did not know what she would do for breakfast. "Well, if you wish," said the lion, "I will go into the forest and kill a deer for you. You can roast it by the fire since your tastes are so peculiar that you prefer cooked food, and then you'll have a good breakfast." "Oh, no, please don't," begged the Tin Woodman. "I should certainly weep if you killed a poor deer, and then my jaws would rust again." But the lion went away into the forest and found his own supper, and no one ever knew what it was, for he never mentioned it. So that's pretty interesting if you think about it, because the lion was brave enough to tell Dorothy, "I'll go and find a deer for you. I'll go hunt for you." So I would think if you were brave enough to go hunting in the forest, don't you think you might already have that courage inside of you, that bravery? And the Tin Woodman stopped him and said, "No, no, no, that will break my heart if you kill an animal." And so you would think that that kind of shows that the Tin Woodman cares and has a heart. So it's interesting that the things that they want to ask for doesn't really seem like they need, right? We'll have to keep reading and see. The Scarecrow found a tree full of nuts and filled Dorothy's basket with them so that she would not be hungry for a long time. She thought this was very kind and thoughtful of the Scarecrow, but she laughed heartily at the awkward way in which the poor creature picked up the nuts. His padded hands were so clumsy, and the nuts were so small that he dropped almost as many as he put in the basket. But the Scarecrow did not mind how long it took him to fill the basket, for it enabled him to stay away from the fire, as he feared a spark might get into his straw and burn him up. So he kept a good distance away from the flames, and only came near to cover Dorothy with dry leaves when she lay down to sleep. These kept her very snug and warm, and she slept soundly until morning. When it was daylight, the girl bathed her face in a rippling brook, and soon after they all started towards the Emerald City. This was to be an eventful day for the travelers. They had hardly been walking an hour when they saw before them a great ditch that crossed the road and divided the forest as far as they could see on either side. It was a very wide ditch, and when they crept up to the edge and looked into it, they could see it was also very deep, and there were many big, jagged rocks at the bottom. The sides were so steep that none of them could climb down, and for a moment it seemed that their journey must end. "Oh, what shall we do?" asked Dorothy despairingly. "Well, I haven't the faintest idea," said the Tin Woodman, and the Lion shook his shaggy mane and looked thoughtful. But the Scarecrow said, "Well, we cannot fly, that's certain. Neither can we climb down into that great ditch. Therefore, if we can't jump over it, I think we must stop where we are." "Well, I think I could jump over it," said the Cowardly Lion, after carefully measuring the distance in his mind. "Well, then we're all right," answered the Scarecrow, "for you can carry us all over on your back, one at a time." "Well, I'll try it," said the Lion. "Who will go first?" So a ditch, and I don't know if they show the ditch on here, where it might be. The ditch is basically the land is up here where they are, and then all of a sudden it drops way down, and then it comes back up. So they have a hard time because there's this big gap in the land that they have to cross. Now it's interesting, the Lion is using bravery to try to jump across, and it was the Scarecrow who was thinking of the ideas. So again, they're using the things that they think they don't have. "Well, who will go first?" "I will," declared the Scarecrow, "for if you found that you could not jump over the gulf, Dorothy would be killed, and the Tin Woodman badly dented on the rocks. But if I'm on your back, it won't matter so much, for the fall won't hurt me at all." "Well, I'm terribly afraid of falling myself," said the Cowardly Lion, "but I suppose there's nothing to do but try it. So get on my back and we'll make the attempt." The Scarecrow sat upon the Lion's back, and the big beast walked to the edge of the gulf and crouched down. "Why don't you run and jump?" asked the Scarecrow. "Because that isn't the way we lions do things," he replied. Then, giving a great spring, he shot through the air and landed safely on the other side. They were all greatly pleased to see how easily he did it, and after the Scarecrow had got down off his back, the Lion sprang back across the ditch again. Dorothy decided to go next, so she took Toto in her arms and climbed on the Lion's back, holding tightly to his mane with one hand. The next moment, it seemed as if she was flying through the air, and then, before she had time to think about it, she was safe on the other side. The Lion went back a third time and got the Tin Woodman, and then they all sat down for a few moments to give the beast a chance to rest, for his great leaps had made his breath short. and he panted like a big dog that had been running for too long. They found the forest very thick on the other side, and it was dark and gloomy. After the lion had rested, they started along the road of yellow brick, silently wondering, each in his own mind, if they would ever come to the ends of the woods and reach bright sunshine again. To add to their discomfort, they soon heard strange noises in the depths of the forest, and the lion whispered to them that it was in this part of the country that the Kalidas lived. What are Kalidas? Asked Dorothy. Well, they're monstrous beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers, replied the lion, and with claws so long and sharp that they could tear me in two as easily as I could kill Toto. I'm terribly afraid of the Kalidas. So obviously, Kalidas are made-up creatures in this story, but they're beasts that have bodies like bears and heads like tigers. So imagine what that would look like. Here is a great picture of the lion going over the ditch with Dorothy on his back. And you can see the yellow brick road is on each side. And it said that there are jagged rocks down below. So that's what they were crossing over. I'm terribly afraid of the Kalidas, said the lion. Well, I'm not surprised that you are, returned Dorothy. They must be dreadful beasts. The lion was about to reply when suddenly they came to another gulf across the road. But this one was so broad and deep that the lion knew at once there was no way he could leap across it. So they sat down to consider what they should do. And after serious thought, the Scarecrow said, well, here's a great tree standing close to this ditch. If the Tin Woodman can chop it down so it will fall to the other side, we can make a bridge and walk across it easily. Look who was using their head. Well, that's a first-rate idea, said the lion. One would almost suspect you had brains in your head instead of straw. The Tin Woodman set to work at once, and so sharp was his axe that the tree was soon chopped nearly through. Then the lion put his strong front legs against the tree and pushed it with all his might, and slowly the big tree tipped and fell with a crash across the ditch, with its top branches on the other side. They had just started to cross this strange bridge when a sharp growl made them all look up. And to their horror, they saw running toward them two great beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers. There are the Kalidas, said the Cowardly Lion, beginning to tremble. Quick, cried the Scarecrow, let us cross over. So Dorothy went first, holding Toto in her arms. The Tin Woodman followed, and the Scarecrow came next. The lion, although he was certainly afraid, turned to face the Kalidas, and then he gave so loud and terrible a roar that Dorothy screamed, and the Scarecrow fell over backward, while even the fierce beast stopped short and looked at him in surprise. But seeing that they were bigger than the lion, and remembering that there were two of them and only one of him, the Kalidas again rushed forward, and the lion crossed over the tree and turned to see what they would do next. Without stopping an instant, the fierce beasts also began to cross the tree bridge, and the lion said to Dorothy, Oh, we are lost, for they will surely tear us to pieces with their sharp claws. But stand close to me and I'll fight them as long as I'm alive. Wait a minute, called the Scarecrow. He had been thinking what was best to be done, and now he asked the Woodman to chop away at the end of the tree that rested on their side of the ditch. The Tin Woodman began to use his axe at once, just as the two Kalidas were nearly across. The tree fell with a crash into the gulf, carrying those two ugly, snarling brutes with it, and both were dashed to pieces on the sharp rocks at the bottom. "Well," said the Cowardly Lion, drawing a long breath of relief, "I see we are going to live a little while longer, and I'm glad of it, for it must be a very uncomfortable thing not to be alive. Those creatures frightened me so badly that my heart is beating yet." "Oh," said the Tin Woodman sadly, "I wish I had a heart to beat." This adventure made the travelers more anxious than ever to get out of the forest, and they walked so fast that Dorothy became tired and had to ride on the lion's back. To their great joy, the trees finally became thinner the farther they advanced, and in the afternoon they suddenly came upon a broad river, flowing swiftly just before them. On the other side of the water, they could see the road of yellow brick, running through a beautiful country with green meadows dotted with bright flowers and all the road bordered with trees hanging full of delicious fruits. They were greatly pleased to see this and the delighted country before them. "Now how shall we cross this river?" asked Dorothy. "Well, that is easily done," replied the Scarecrow. "The Tin Woodman must build us a raft so we can float to the other side." So the Woodman took his axe and began to chop down small trees to make a raft. And while he was busy at this, the Scarecrow found on the riverbank a tree full of fine fruit. This pleased Dorothy, who had been eating nothing but nuts all day, and she made a hearty meal of the ripe fruit. But it takes time to make a raft, even when one is as industrious and as untiring as the Tin Woodman. And when night came, the work was still not done. So they found a cozy place under the trees where they slept well until the morning. And Dorothy dreamed of the Emerald City and of the good Wizard of Oz, who would soon send her back home again. And that is the end of chapter 7. Here are our characters coming through the forest. So they definitely had an adventure in this chapter. We met the Kalidas, and the Kalidas are obviously made-up creatures in this story. The Kalidas actually are not in the movie. A lot of adventures are left out in the movie, and that happens to be one of them. Here's a gorgeous picture of Dorothy on the lion's back crossing over the ditch. So there are no pictures of the tree bridge, which they had to make at the second ditch, but you really begin to see that the Scarecrow is almost the leader of the group. He's coming up with all the good ideas. And it's really interesting that he's the one who's thinking of the good ideas when he's the one who's saying he doesn't have brains. Let's see. In the movie, they definitely travel through a forest. And this is probably the closest picture we have to them traveling through a forest. There's a very famous expression, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. And that comes from The Wizard of Oz. Because Dorothy and her friends hear some wild animal noises and they say, oh, they're lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. Now we know from reading the story that it's actually not lions and tigers and bears. It's actually the Kalidas. So there are definitely some differences. The next chapter is called, well, it's chapter 8, and it's called The Deadly Poppy Field. And that's the chapter that we'll be reading next time, and we'll see what kind of adventure they get into in that chapter. So in terms of this map, I'm not really sure where they are in this map. We know they're by a river now. And so basically this map, I would think, doesn't follow the story as well as My Father's Dragon did. This map is more to show us the 4 different lands, north, south, east, and west, and to remind us that the good witches live in the north and the south, and the wicked witches live in the east and the west. All right. So thank you so much, kindergartners, for joining me today. And like always, there's no place like home. Bye.